Hi, everyone. My name is Pascal Geenens, and I'm together with Daniel Smith from Radware. We are doing a live cast today, so if all goes well, you should see it on webcams and also with a presentation. So we wanted to reach out a little bit closer to everyone with this corona happening. And we both are threat researchers for Radware. We want to have a live talk. We have this presentation prepared. But first, I want to let Daniel introduce himself. So Daniel also has some welcoming words. Daniel?
Hello, my name is Daniel Smith. I'm a researcher for Radware. I've been here for about 5 years. I specialize in darknet research and DDoS research. Spent a lot of time building out honeypots, searching for criminals and malicious activity, as well as also monitoring their business side of their activities, building out structured services, and making a lot of money from actually launching these attacks. Thank you, Pascal.
That's great. He's a scary guy, so I have to be careful around him. So today, of course, in the current situation, what we want to talk about and what our discussion will be centering around mostly will be coronavirus. We will try to have some loose format, meaning that we have some slides prepared to guide our talk, but we will also look at the Q&A. So if you have questions, you will find on your dashboard, you will find the Q&A application where you can submit the questions. And if you don't see it on webcam, by the way, look for somewhere there should be a button to enable the webcam view. And there's also a presentation view. So just to make sure that you also find, if you want to follow, it's easier if you have the presentation inside to see what we're talking about. So what we're going to discuss today, there's a couple of topics that are centering around Corona. And one topic that is not Corona-based, but that was important enough to bring up now in this session. So first of all, we're all in lockdown. So Daniel is locked down, I'm locked down, but I think that most people who are joining are also sitting at home, and that means that many people will be working from home. So teleworking is like a big thing right now. And most of us are doing it through either enterprise VPN or RDP. Of course, there's connectivity through the cloud for those who have their core business application already moved into the cloud. But for some applications, and especially for those people who are typically working from a desk, they like to have their desk environment. So RDP is even a thing. So I know that around security people, when we say remote desktop straight into the enterprise, we start shivering, but it is happening. And the same with enterprise VPN. So enterprise VPN is much more secure, but making an SSL VPN connection, there's still some dangers with it. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And with teleworking, of course, comes we need to get in touch with our coworkers, so collaboration for work, but not only limited to work. Our kids are at home, and kids need to go to school. So schools also started using collaboration tools to get to their students. And also friends and family are getting together, social gatherings like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example. They have gatherings online. And with that comes a new phenomenon, because the trolls that were typically somewhere in a metro station or that were physically somewhere in an event now also are going digital, and they're joining those collaboration meetings. And there's a phenomenon of Zoom trolls. And I've been following them like last week just for fun, just about 30 minutes. I went into one of their Discord channels, and it's mostly teenagers. So it's teenagers being bored, and they just want to troll around with people who are using Zoom for their gatherings. So when you're on that Discord channel, like every minute there's a guy who posts a new Zoom meeting, the meeting ID, sometimes without password because people did not put in a password, did not put any security. Sometimes with a password because, the school, for example, published the list of which teacher will be available at which time with the Zoom ID and the password. So very convenient if you can just go to the website and copy paste them. So every minute there's like this new Zoom ID, and then you see like 20 kids all together moving into that Zoom meeting, and within 1 minute, the Zoom meeting is full of trolls. So posting inappropriate pictures to the meeting, shouting at the people, disconnecting the teacher from the meeting. And ends up with the meeting being canceled or being disrupted. And I would not attribute it to Zoom. I know that Zoom has been having a lot of bad press, but I think they're trying to do a good job to get up to speed and to fix all their vulnerabilities. We all know that there's no such thing as a software without vulnerabilities, so they're trying their best. But it's especially the people setting up a meeting without a password, people not putting up measures to say that somebody new who connects puts him first in a lobby and then accept him into the meeting, or being able to mute the whole group or disconnect other people. So it mostly comes down on the people using it. And yeah, if you know, it's like friends and family, social gatherings. So it's people who do it for a professional job, so they don't think about this security. So that's a new phenomenon coming up. Another thing based on Corona, of course, with all the fear and everybody needing information, there's a lot of phishing scams going around. So phishing is one of the things that is really trending. And with that phishing comes, of course, the risk for ransomware. So that is one of our two biggest risks that we see for businesses and for the availability of your business. Ransomware is one, DDoS is the second, but ransomware is very much connected to that phishing. It's also connected to the RDP, by the way, and I will also come back to that in a second. Then another thing that with all the need for information is flash browse. So whenever there's new numbers published, you see all those people going together to that website with the latest updates to see what is the latest number of today. And some people might be misinterpreting all these legal users connecting as a DDoS attack. So we will have an example of that later on. Then there's also the watering hole attacks, because many people go to the same websites that are interesting for information about Corona or COVID-19. And hackers get into those websites and put in malware. So whoever comes by will get infected by the malware. So we have seen some attacks in that area as well. And then there's the automated threat, who will also thrive on the fact that people need information on Corona. So what they do is they go out and scrape the latest articles on Corona and use that to build their own website and to attract people. But actually, their goal is not to inform the people. Of course, their goal is to sell something that they doing some scams or selling something that they should not be selling, or that is pretty borderline legal. And then there's the disinformation. And the latest one that we were talking about yesterday, Daniel and myself, was the one that came up in the conspiracy theories of 5G being actually the radiation of 5G being the infection of Corona. So whenever you're close to 5G antenna, that's how Corona is spreading. So, and actually it moves up into the physical world. So the cyber conspiracy went into physical, because now in the UK, there have been several transmission antennas for 5G that have been put on fire, even those who were not active already. So it has been motivating people to put fire to those antennas. Now, the last topic for today, and that will be one that I'm mostly interested in, and Daniel will cover that. There was a leak on the FSB contracting a tool of cyber destruction, which was called Frontal. So that will come back at the end. So stay until the end, and Daniel will have some interesting things to talk about that. So first of all, we all know everyone is working from home. VPN security becomes paramount when you do that. And here are some examples of the numbers. The numbers come from Shodan. RDP has been up, VPN has been up. I know when you look at it at the long term, it's not at its peak moment, especially for VPN. VPN used to have bigger moments, but it shows a trend that people who might have disabled VPN or might have used VPN for a limited amount of people, like administrators or DevOps connecting from home, needing access to the system, but the rest of the workforce is not connecting through VPN. They're using other ways of connecting or cloud applications. But now all of a sudden, you have everybody working from home, so pretty much every application in your enterprise must be made available to the outside world. So that means that a lot of people have been looking at solutions to quickly put up those applications. So, and I don't think that most organizations will now start to say, okay, I need this application remotely accessible, so let me quickly migrate it to the cloud. It's not something that you do in a whiff. So I do expect, however, that after Corona dies out, hopefully it will die out completely, but after this whole pandemic and when the world starts to get back to normal, that a lot of people will actually accelerate or rethink their cloud strategy, and we will see much more application moving to the cloud. Because those who already moved the application in the cloud, they're good. They can send the people home and people can connect to the cloud and use the application the same way they did in the office because it's in a central place. However, for those who do not have the application, they need to make it available in some way. And there's two very convenient ways, and that's VPN or remote desktop. Now, what are the risks with VPN? And there's basically two big categories of risk. One is on the availability side of the VPN. They can be impacted by volumetric DDoS. So when you publish VPN and you put your whole workforce to work remotely, whenever they cannot access the company, that means that they cannot work. So your business comes to a grinding stop whenever you're under attack from a volumetric DDoS or another DDoS, which was not the case before. Before, people were sitting inside of the organization, so they still could do things. They could still pick up the phone, they could still talk to each other, they can have meetings. But now all this stops because your enterprise is using VPN, and that's the way that you connect to it. And when you block that, well, nobody can work. So enterprises are exposing themselves to that risk. So volumetric DDoS, where you just saturate the bandwidth and nobody can access it anymore. And another attack, because most of the enterprise VPN is based on SSL VPN, is the SSL attacks. SSL attacks are much more convenient for attackers because by design, SSL on the server side takes much more resources, like 15 times more resources required on the server side to process an SSL connectivity request than on the client side. So with a very limited resources and a limited amount of packets, you can actually bring down a SSL VPN service. So that's in the area of availability. The other area, and that was mostly in 2019, where enterprise VPNs made the news, and I'm talking about enterprise VPN from serious vendors, from respected vendors such as Palo Alto, Fortinet, PulseSecure, Citrix. So those are like the leaders in enterprise VPN solutions and remote access solutions. So those had many vulnerabilities over 2019, and those vulnerabilities actually made the topic of different or several alerts and warnings from US and from the UK agencies, where they said, please people, go patch your remote access solutions because we know we have evidence that they're being abused, that those vulnerabilities are used by advanced persistent threat or nation states to get access to your network and implant backdoors, extract information, or even infect you with the ransomware. Now, one side note, all of the links in here, so we will make available a document afterwards. I'm not sure yet how we're going to get it to you, but either by email or on the landing page for the replay of this of this live session, we'll make available all the links. So whenever you want more information on one of those topics, you will be able to click the link and you will find out. We also had an alert that we brought out very recently, so it was mid-March, about all the exact vulnerabilities that were impacting those enterprise VPN solutions. So it's not that it's a high risk, because there's a patch risk, but you know as well as I do that patching is not always our big forte. So we need to make sure that before we bring online enterprise VPN solutions at this time, that they are patched. Now, I said that RDP is also dangerous, and one of the things with RDP is from a report from Codeware, RDP is still the preferred attack vector for ransomware. So 2 out of 3 ransomwares carries an attack vector to infect an organization through RDP. So we would all think that phishing is the number one. Phishing is, of course, a big contributor to the infection of ransomware, but RDP is the most important attack vector. So, and how they can do that, of course, they can use vulnerabilities like Bluekeep for those who leave old systems connected to the internet. And yeah, I can assure you, there's still old systems connected, and those, I'm thinking mainly ICS So industrial control systems that are connected to the internet directly exposing RDP because the guy who needs to get remote access to those switches from a PC, he will just use RDP. And typically that's running on an old version of Windows because if they upgrade to a newer version, they're out of support because their control system is very specifically only tested with that system. So they suffer. Other people that suffer for doing updates is medical systems, so like systems connected to scanners. You see that some systems are still running Windows 7, Windows XP even, because the scanner does not support a newer version. So those are typically the ones that would be most vulnerable to exploits like Bluekeep. But even if your system is fully up to date and you don't have a good password hygiene, there's still the ATO attack, so brute forcing of attacks. And Microsoft did a report on it because there was so many activity in RDP on brute forcing that Microsoft did an extensive report in 2019, I believe it was the second half of 2019, where they clearly had some statistics coming out. And as you see here, yeah, it's less than 0.1% of the brute force attacks that are successful. But the most important is, so not the success rate, but brute force attacks take on average like 2-3 days, which means that your server, your RDP server, is being pounded by a tool like Encrack, for example, for 2 to 3 days long, continuously somebody trying to come in, put in credentials, trying to resolve a username. So even though that the success rate is low, there is still success, and it's very easy to do. The bad guys just go online, they download Encrack, they run Encrack, there's a dictionary built in, they can put in some parameters. So it takes them, 10 minutes? You just put up a cloud server for $5 per month, you put the tool on it, you run it, and that's it. You get all the results back. So it's so easy and so low footprint to get in. And I can even tell because at home, I'm running some honeypots at home and also in the cloud, and I downloaded a honeypot called Heralding. And Heralding does looks for brute forcing and authentications on different protocols, and one of them is RDP. So I put it out there, and RDP at home, and I'm looking at the numbers now. That's why I'm looking to the side screen. But RDP, for example, at home, at my connection at home, I had like 3,200 attempts to brute force in less than a week. And when you go to the cloud in Japan, for example, or better no, let's start with London. In London, I had about 3,700 attempts in 1 week. Now let's move to Japan, and in Japan, it's like almost 20,000 attempts to do RDP. Now, more worrying, actually, when I was running Heralding, is to see that VNC connections. So VNC is like the open source alternative, well, not the open source, but an alternative that's multi-platform for RDP. And VNC at home, I had 250,000 connections in 1 week. And the same from Japan. And in London, there was about 380,000 connections in 1 week trying to brute force that connection. Now, the lower numbers on RDP, I think Heralding is it's hard to completely simulate the RDP process. So I think that something is missing in the RDP process to catch all the sessions. But still, it gives you an indication. So this is going on. And this is impacting our services when we do RDP. So you need to make sure that you put something in place, like look for sessions that come in on RDP and limit the number of new sessions per minute, because there will not be that many users or the same user coming in from the same source IP all the time over and over again. Because most of the attacks that I'm talking about, the number of IPs is still limited. You see 300,000 attacks, maybe 1 million attacks in total, but the number of IPs is just a fraction of that. We're just talking a couple of thousands of IPs that are coming in. So it's always the same server that is like bashing and trying to get in, and does that for a couple of days in a row. So just throttle the number of new connections based on source IP, and you should have a revival of your RDP connection. Now, it also says not only these threats from RDP and then VPN, but also bad bots. So the automated threats, bad bots are having a good amount of fun with this Corona thing, and especially because people have a need for information. So in the media and digital publishing, our researchers from our bot management product came up with this graph from one of our customers, where you can see on the right top side in this graph that there's a sudden surge in bot scraping for articles. And what they're looking for is all the newest articles about coronavirus, because people are hungry for information, so they go out and search for new articles on coronavirus. Whatever new angle, whatever new conspiracy is out there, I want to read about it. So what those bots do is actually they go to different good media and digital publishing firms. They scrape the content of that article and publish it on their own website. They aggregate that content, but without agreement from the media and digital publishing side. So they just aggregate it, and the idea is by aggregating all that content, they try to attract users to them. And then they will put in malware or they will do some other scams. So the idea is just to build an interesting website full of content, but in an easy way that they did not write. They go steal it from somebody else, they aggregate it, they put it out there and try to attract people. Another thing that bots are doing, and that's especially in the e-commerce side, is that we see that bots are ramping up in the search for everything that's hand sanitizers and face masks. And we all know what happened to the price of hand sanitizers and face masks. Because in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a shortage in hand sanitizers, shortage in face masks. There was also a shortage in toilet paper, but we did not see that coming. However, these two are really the number one search item, and you can see the graph. It's really spiking. So they're looking to buy as much as possible hand sanitizers and face masks and then sell it on other sites for incredible prices. Now, the last thing I talked about is a lot of people coming into a website for information. So and we saw it happen in Australia, MyGov. Don't want to say anything bad about MyGov, but MyGov was surprised actually because typically on average they get a couple of thousands of users. But all of a sudden they saw connections from hundreds of thousands of different sources coming into their website. So what would you think if that happens in a period of a couple of hours? You would think that you're under DDoS attack, right? So, and it even went in the news that MyGov is under DDoS attack and their website crashed because it was so much load coming. And afterwards, when MyGov investigated, they came back with saying, yeah, it was not a DDoS attack. It was actually legitimate traffic. It was a flash crowd. It was just a lot of people. There was something in the news, so they all go together to that one website, and then all of a sudden you see that infrastructure falling over because it was not dimensioned for this. And this is something that we will see happening more often, and that we already seen happening. So it happens on the scale of cloud providers because everybody's now going online, working online. So the cloud providers, they're working close to threshold. Same for digital transmission and digital streaming. And I believe that my angle into Daniel's talk, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, and I'm going to let Daniel continue on what's happening on the scale of internet.
Okay, thank you, Pascal. Just to bridge off of your topic there, some of the things that we started learning during the global pandemic is that, in general, global shelter-in-place results in unanticipated surges of traffic, and we've seen a few cases of this over the last month or so. And in general, like a river, it's going to flow on the path it wants to flow. And so when we're all forced to sit inside in quarantine and shelter in place, we have a lot of free time on our hands. And so naturally, a lot of people have been going to streaming and gaming services to fill that void. Because of that, we're seeing companies over in Europe have to throttle their traffic, specifically Amazon, Netflix, YouTube, Facebook, and Disney. But they're not the only ones to put out this kind of information. Vodafone put out a report earlier this month that said they saw a 50% increase in traffic on their network. And Bloomberg also put out a report saying they saw a 20% increase in streaming worldwide. So with this shelter in place, we've seen a number of people go home and start using the internet and start using excessive amount of traffic that they normally used to not produce, and now they are. And because of that, we're starting to see problems because of service availability, that when an internet service goes down or is degraded in the middle of a pandemic, it can cause global crisis. And the world has become heavily dependent upon modern services. If there's any form of a breakdown that happens in global continuity, you're going to actually have a breakdown in modern society, and it's going to cause panic, it's going to cause crisis, it's going to cause speculation. And some of the few examples that we've seen so far is in Paris, the public hospital in Paris that manages 39 different hospitals saw a DDoS attack. They saw an hour-long attack that was directed at their hospital. And fortunately, there was no critical applications that were actually taken out because of the DDoS attack, but they did see loss of application services because of the mitigation. So what had happened is they had blocked external access to try and slow this attack. And when they did that, their remote employees that were sheltering in place because of the pandemic lost access to email, they lost access to Skype, they lost access to remote applications. And this is where it becomes a problem, is that when you have employees that are not deemed essential to be inside of a service center or a business, and they go home and you restrict that access, they are not able to actually work. And so some of the things that we're seeing is that we're seeing more and more people creating more and more traffic, which creates a smaller bottleneck for criminals. That criminals need less resources to actually launch an attack with this peak of traffic that's happening during this pandemic. Along with this attack, we also saw an attack that happened in the Czech Republic, and this one was pretty severe because the cyber attack actually required them to postpone surgeries. So in the middle of a pandemic, while you're actually having medical issues, criminals, horrible people out there, are launching attacks against hospitals. And it's very interesting because some gangs out there have decided not to launch attacks against public services and businesses during this time. But as we're seeing that not all criminals actually are honorable. Some of them are actually really, really horrible people by launching attacks specifically against hospital services. But another thing that we saw was attack against takeaway food delivery service in Germany. And this is something that we have a little bit of experience with as far as ransom, denial of service, RDoS attacks. Typically what happens is these attackers will pick a certain vertical. They will pick a certain ransom, which would have been 2 Bitcoins. It's usually about between 1 and 2 Bitcoins, depending on what the price of Bitcoin is at the moment. And they launch a sample attack against a service, and they simply send an email saying, hey, we launched this attack, and we're going to continue launching this attack unless you actually pay us money. And then once you pay us money, we'll stop the attack. In the past, we saw company groups like Armada Collective and DD4BC. These were fairly honorable RDoS groups. When you actually pay, they didn't actually launch an attack. Unfortunately or fortunately, both these groups have been arrested and they no longer exist. The problem is that we have copycats. And because of their actual tactics, techniques, and procedures of making money were very successful, we've seen other groups duplicate these activities. And so today it's not so uncommon to get a letter from someone saying they're Fancy Bear or Lizard Squad or LolSec. They're using these names as a way to instill fear to make you actually pay this ransom. In reality, when you take a moment and you look at the names they're using, Lizard Squad and LolSec, these were never groups that had to do RDoS campaigns to make money. They naturally made money through selling access to their stressor services, so ransom extortion was never in their TTP. Now, when you get down to someone claiming they're Fancy Bear, technically Fancy Bear doesn't really DDoS, but a lot of that is changing with some information I'll get into later. But, you know, it's very easy to look at some of these letters and make a decision very quickly if it's actually a reputable group or not. Now, in this group, attacking pizza.de, they didn't actually claim that they're any big name group. They just simply took out a service during the pandemic. And this caused a huge issue because this service delivers to 15,000 restaurants across Germany. So what happened is the criminal came in, he launched an attack, and it brought down the service. It delayed service of food being delivered for hours. Some orders didn't even go through. And in a moment of a pandemic where we are limited on our availability of time in which we can go to the grocery store and social distancing, a lot of us have chosen to use takeaway services to bring food to our door with contactless delivery, so we can avoid spreading coronavirus and flatten the curve. Well, in this situation, unfortunately, someone decided that this would be a great time to launch a ransom attack. And they were charging 2 Bitcoin. As I understand, the company did not actually pay the ransom. The attack did stop, but it caused severe issues for a day for people in Germany that were trying to actually do takeaway service and flatten the curve. Into the FSB. So this is my last little part. This is kind of interesting. A few weeks ago, there was a group called Digital Revolution. They launched their 3rd attack against FSB contractors. And this is starting to become a very interesting thing with this group. They've done it 3 times. In 2018, they attacked a company called Quantum. And in 2019, they attacked a group called Systech. In 2018, they were linking the contractors for the FSB were creating social media monitoring tools that they could monitor what you're doing on Facebook and Twitter, and build profiles, social profiles about who you were, the activities you get into. Systech in 2019, the attacks were directed at 6 different FSB projects. One of the main projects was a Tor scraping project and Tor de-anonymization. So it's showing that FSB's capability is getting to the point of wanting to not only catalog and document who you are and your habits, but they're also wanting to de-anonymize your Tor network, your different ways of going about staying private online. So what we saw with the 3rd attack is they attacked a group called Inform Invest Group and Ode LLC. And what they had disclosed is they disclosed a contract that came from FSB Unit 64829. And this contract was specified between 2017 and 2018 to build a botnet. And so as I said earlier, if you get an RDoS note from Fancy Bear, typically you could write it off saying that Fancy Bear is not exactly a group that launches DDoS attacks. But as information is coming out slowly, FSB has a very, very specific interest in IoT botnets. And so what we saw from this leak is that we saw that FSB had an interest specifically in creating an IoT botnet after the Mirai leak happened in 2016. And so what they're looking at is they're looking at infecting IoT devices, specifically security camera and DVR devices, and they're using default credentials. So they don't actually plan or specify inside these contracts to use exploits to gain access to these IoT devices, but they want to use default credentials, and they want the default credentials to be able to be updated so they're not hard-coded. They're also going through different specifications of how to obfuscate their C2 through a series of proxies. So it would be more difficult to take down their actual infrastructure. And another thing that we found inside the contracts is that there was a specific clause where they did not want Russian language or Russian letters to actually be used in the source code or any of the documentations that were leaked. But the strange part is they did not care about the word fronton being used as actually a declassified word inside the documents. So for me as a researcher, it's kind of interesting seeing the FSB not want Russian language inside their documentation, but they do not have a problem declassifying the name of it. Anyways, this puts us into a very interesting position about active warfare on the internet as far as nation-state TTPs for DDoS. So now we can actually consider the Russians to have the capabilities to launch a DDoS attack. So once again, you have another nation-state that is capable of DDoS attacks. Another nation-state that does this activity is China. China is very well known for creating botnets and launching attacks. They also have their Great Firewall that they use to launch a number of attacks that have actually seen world record attacks, not at the moment, but they have in the past. And also it opens up another thing as far as nation-state groups using subcontractors to do their work. And it's interesting, you see some of this in Iran as far as like in, I think it was like 2012, 2013 when they launched the attacks against the financial industry. They themselves did not actually launch the DDoS attacks. They hired a bunch of children or kids, skids, whatever you want to call it, to launch a DDoS attack against the financial institute. Today, in 2020, we still see these same tactics out there as far as nation-states going out and subcontracting lower quality work to different companies. So specifically, Fronton was put out to Invest Group and Ode for about $16,000 to build this IoT botnet for the FSB. So it just kind of gives you an idea of IoT botnets are a very serious threat, especially during a pandemic because there's more of a threat towards bottlenecks. But also we're seeing nation states going out there and contributing to this chaos by going out and building these botnets. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Pascal.
Hello, Daniel.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Pascal. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was on my end. My phone got disconnected. So yeah, I was saying, Daniel, let's first see through the questions, or I will go through the questions. But Op Israel was supposed to happen yesterday. Can you explain to the people what Op Israel is and what exactly happened yesterday? Did something happen or not? What's your take on it?
Yes, sir. Okay, so Op Israel has been an operation that's been going on for quite some time now. Back in the day, a bunch of people from Anonymous decided to create an operation to attack Israel for certain issues related to Palestine. As of today, Anonymous is pretty much in non-existence. They do exist in some small form of fashion, ideology, if you want to say. But in reality, the form of the group, the main operators are either working in large tech companies now or have been arrested. So there's not a lot of activity behind Op Israel. And some of the things that you'll see with Op Israel at the moment in 2020 is those that are still around that are reproducing and republishing documents from Op Israel are actually republishing 2018, 2019 documents. So one of the things I highly suggest to anybody that sees a leak that comes out from Op Israel 2020 is to verify that data and actually see if it was a previous leak. This is a typical tactic, technique, and procedure of anonymous skids and also Op Israel is to repost information every year to try and get some kind of media attention, to try and get some kind of drive going that their operation is successful. At the current moment of April 8th, if you go looking through social media sites, you will not find much chatter at all. When you go back to Op Israel in 2013, 2014, you couldn't ignore it. There was so much information that was on every social media site, IRCs, forums, blogs, you name it, it was there. Today, it's not. So what I recommend to people is to take Anonymous' threat somewhat seriously, but also take it with a grain of salt and understanding that this group is no longer a serious threat actor. Most of the serious threat actors from Anonymous have moved on to organized crime and are now following profit over loss.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to inform everybody, no, we have not been DDoS attacked on the platform. It was my stupidity. I put my phone on mute to type some answers to questions, and then I started talking and forgot I was on mute. You know, it happens to the best of us. It's so typical. So I got some people here. Oh, we hope we're not in the DDoS attack. So that's one that we can already easily resolve. So. Daniel, I did not see a question. It was only comment because my voice was gone, which is only natural when I put myself on mute. But one more question, if you allow me. I don't know how far we can talk about it, but there was some talk about DDoS attacks going around on Twitter, and I know that you looked into it. I don't want you to stretch too far with the intelligence, but is there a threat out there?
So at the current moment, the top two threats through a pandemic, of course, are going to be ransomware and DDoS. At the moment, you're also seeing a lot of claims of denial of service attacks. And what I suggest for people to do is take it with a grain of salt as well. Take some time, look at the sources, and understand what has happened. As you said earlier in your presentation, Pascal, flash mobs are a very big thing nowadays, and bottlenecks are very real. So when you have a 50% increase on a network, it only takes 50% less resources for a criminal to actually launch an attack. With that being said, it's kind of surprising that we're not seeing record amounts of DDoS attacks and ransom attacks at the moment. And I think we can attribute that slightly to the fact that some organized criminals have a soul and a conscience. But it can be expected that these things will pick up as we're coming out of the pandemic. Of course, criminals are going to be hungry too. So at the end of this, they're going to have a hunt for profit as well, just like anybody else.
Okay, that's great. So yeah, we're at the 40-minute mark. So I think we will stop it here. We have some questions, but we will answer them offline. I especially liked one question, the person who's asking about our core offerings. Yeah, of course we are vendors, so we are working in the DDoS area. So that should be more of a disclaimer than than anything else. We are not here to talk about our products, but we have plenty of webinars that are talking on our services and products. So Radware is a security vendor. We provide DDoS protection in terms of on-prem, from appliances up to DDoS cloud protection, and also web application firewalling and load balancing. So we're in the availability and also the application deployment as well as the security. So that is as far as I want to talk on this webinar. This webinar is more, the idea is to have us talk about the threats that are going around and about what we see, what is our opinion on it. So for now, thank you very, very much for joining. I hope you all stay safe. Don't forget, don't touch, because I saw myself and Daniel touching our face a couple of times. Don't touch your face. They clearly stated this in the U.S. Don't touch your face. So stay safe, everybody. Thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure we will be back maybe within a month with new content and a new live. So look out for that, and hope you can join us. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Daniel.
Bye, Pascal.